Hello and welcome to today's flight. We're situated on the ground at Orcas Island Eastsound Airport in Northwest Washington in the San Juan Islands. We're getting ready to take off and head over to Olympic National Park. We're going to overfly and then land on Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is a location I've flown to many times in the real-world airplane and taken some beautiful 4K footage. I'm going to include that footage here in this video so that you can compare the terrain in real-world GoPro footage to the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 terrain. So far, I've been very, very impressed with Microsoft Flight Simulator and their ability to replicate real-world terrain. This is the Cowan Sim 500E helicopter. I must give a shout out to Cowan Sim for their beautiful aircraft, their fantastic customer service, always striving to improve their products and looking for user input. So we're going to jump inside the helicopter and cover some technical stuff. The stuff we're going to talk about is creating a flight plan in ForeFlight using user-created waypoints. We're going to upload that into SimBrief, and then we're going to download it into our GTN 750 on board the 500E helicopter. I must add that in order to have the GTN 750 feature available, you have to have that software in your community folder. I've also purchased the premium version of the PMS 750 software, which allows me to upload directly from SimBrief into our GPS. Okay, we're getting ready to do a cold, dark start, but before we do, let's go ahead and bring up ForeFlight, create our flight plan, and then we'll talk about how to transfer that over to SimBrief. There, as you can see in the middle, is the position of our aircraft, courtesy of Flight Events. It's actually transmitting the location of our aircraft to ForeFlight. ForeFlight doesn't know the difference between a real-world airplane and the simulator. So there's the airport diagram, and we're going to go ahead and create our flight plan. We're going to begin by putting our departure airport KORS in there. And then we're going to go ahead and zoom out over here to Olympic National Park. And there's Mount Olympus standing at 7969 feet. We're going to do a long press on top of Mount Olympus, and that's going to be one of our waypoints. We're going to create 2 or 3 more waypoints just to show you some of the capability. How about Mount Deception there at 7788? So we're going to do a long press on there, and then we'll go ahead and add that as a waypoint. We're going to land at Terminating Airport, Kilo Tango India Whiskey, but let's go ahead and do a long press somewhere in the vicinity of the airport, and let's pick a waypoint in the IFR system. There it is right there, CBOD. So we're going to add that as well, and then we're going to do a long press on KTIW, add KTIW. Let's take a look at our flight plan so far. So there it is, KORS, top of Mount Olympus, top of Mount Deception, CBOD waypoint, and then Terminating Airport. Let's add one more waypoint. The reason we're going to do that is if you look at this airspace right here, this red line delineates the separation between Canadian and U.S. airspace. So we want to avoid flying into that. So we're going to go ahead and drag that course line over and create a new waypoint right there. So that's going to be our full flight. We're not going to cover anything other than the flight from KORS to the top of Mount Olympus. So that's going to be the flight plan. Okay, so what do we do to transfer that flight plan to SimBrief? Well, the first thing I want to point out is that these user-created waypoints must be in degrees, minutes, and seconds format. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that in ForeFlight. So we're going to click on More over here on the lower right, and then Settings, and up here on Filter, we're going to type in Units. That's going to bring us to the units and time options. We're going to click down here on Coordinates. And then you could see that I have selected degrees, minutes, and seconds, but there's many other formats that you can select. This is the one that must be selected in order for this to work. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to transmit this flight plan to ForeFlight Flights. So we're going to click on that Send button and click on Flights. And then we're going to bring up ForeFlight Web, and we're going to go ahead and copy that flight plan and paste it into SimBrief. Okay, here we are in ForeFlight Web. Let's go ahead and click on Flights. We're going to click on the most recent flight that we just created. And there you can see the departure airport, Kilo Oscar Romeo Sierra, destination Kilo Tango India Whiskey. And then there's our user-created waypoints. There's CBOD, and we're going to go ahead and copy that whole flight plan. Then we're going to go over to SimBrief, and we're going to click on New Flight. So we have to have our departure in there, which is KORS, and I've already got KTIW entered in there. As you can see, there's not going to be an alternate. So we're going to take that out. It is important to note that you must have an aircraft type in here. The 500E helicopter will not be one of the options available, but you must select something. So, and it honestly doesn't matter what you select. I'm going to click on one of the ones that I have already created in the system, which is the Piper Seneca. This part does not matter, but you must select an aircraft in order for this to work. So here it's selected a route, and we're going to go ahead and overwrite that and paste in our waypoints, and then there's CBOD. Okay, so this is ready to be created. We're going to generate a flight. Now on the right side, the map should populate all of the waypoints that we added between KORS and KTIW, and there they are. So KORS, that's the waypoint that's going to keep us out of Canadian airspace. There's the top of Mount Olympus. There's the top of Mount Deception. There's the CBOD waypoint, and then there's KTIW. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get in our helicopter, and then we're going to fire up the avionics, and I'll bring up the GTN 750, and we're going to import this flight plan into the GPS. And I must note that in order for you to be able to upload a SimBrief flight plan into the GTN 750, you must have the premium version, and that's the PMS 750 premium version. If you don't have the premium version, you're going to have to enter these waypoints manually. I'll go ahead and show you that once we fire up the GPS, if that's the option that you choose. Okay, let's go ahead and get the helicopter started and fire up our avionics. All right, we're going to fire up the avionics master, and you'll notice that the aircraft defaults to the Garmin 530/430 setup. Well, we're going to change that, and again, in order for this option to work, you must have the GTN 750 downloaded and in your community folder. Here's the GTN option switch. We're going to go ahead and turn that on, and that's going to be booting up. The other thing we're going to use during this flight, talk a little bit about, is the stability augmentation system that Cowan Sim has built into several or most of their helicopters. That's this right here, the stability augmentation system. Right here, it's in the standby mode. Today we're going to talk about the heading, nav, and altitude features. We're going to go ahead and upload the flight plan that we just created. We'll go over in a minute how to manually create these waypoints. So we're going to import. We're going to import from SimBrief and click OK. Yes, we do want to load that flight plan. There it is, and there's our user-created waypoints. That's going to be the one that keeps us just outside Canadian airspace. That's going to be Mount Olympus. That's going to be Mount Deception. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and squawk VFR 1200. And that's all set. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our radios. Let's bring this back to map view here. I'm going to change VLOC to GPS. That's another thing that must happen. And there's our flight plan. Okay, now I use an Octovi IFR1 in order to select frequencies, change OBS and heading bug. Let's go ahead and bring up ForeFlight. We're going to do a center of the aircraft at KORS. We're going to long press on KORS, and then we're going to go ahead and bring up the details. And there you can see the AWOS frequency is 135425. So I like to put the AWOS in my COM2 radio. So there's COM2, and we're going to be 135425. All right. And the Octavi also has a flip-flop switch, so that's now active. And the CTEF frequency right here is 128.25. So I'm going to go ahead and set that in COM1. 128.250, and we're going to flip-flop that. All right, so those frequencies are set. We're not going to set up any navigation frequencies. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get rid of this guy here for now. And we're going to look at our initial course line. And the initial course line is going to be 187 degrees. So we're going to set 187. And again, the IFR1 allows us to do this. So we're going to set our heading bug to 187. 187 set. And then we're going to go ahead and set our OBS to 187 degrees. And that's also set. Okay, let's go ahead and bring up ForeFlight. And before we fly our course line, I do want to show you the beautiful shoreline here at Orcas Island. This is an airport that I fly into in the real-world airplane. It's a short walk to the waterfront. They have some beautiful restaurants and an absolutely gorgeous waterfront area with some fantastic views. So we'll go ahead and fly over that on our way outbound. All right, here we are heading south from the airport, and you'll see how close it is to the shoreline. Look how gorgeous that is. What a beautiful flight it is coming in over the water. And they have a quaint little island just off the shoreline there. There's the downtown area, and there's some really fantastic restaurants. You could just sit and relax and look out over the Puget Sound. There to the left is Mount Constitution. That's a little over 2,000 feet high. That's one of the things that makes the San Juan Island so fantastic, is the mountains that go right down to the shoreline. Beautiful, calm day with perfect visibility here today. And we're climbing at about 1,000 feet per minute. We'll bring up ForeFlight in a minute here so you can see our aircraft position relative to ForeFlight moving map. There, if you look down at our OBS, we're going to be intercepting our course line, and the OBS will center. And then we'll go ahead and activate the heading bug in this stability augmentation system, and then we'll switch over to nav mode, and we'll lock in the altitude at 8,500. Just coming up on 2,000 feet. We're going to be flying over Friday Harbor Airport on San Juan Island. That's another airport that I do fly into. Also a short walk to the downtown area. Absolutely gorgeous. One of my favorite places in the world to fly. There, as you see us intercepting our course line on ForeFlight, you can see the OBS also centering. 2,500. And that's San Juan Island just ahead of the aircraft. And we're going to fly right over the harbor, and you'll get to see the airport down below the helicopter. And we're doing 114 knots over ground, climbing at 1,500 feet per minute. There's 3,000. Over to the left is Whidbey Island, and typically when I fly into the San Juan Islands, I will fly through the Whidbey Island Naval Air Station airspace, and that's to keep us over land as long as possible. In the event of an engine failure, it would give me a place to land as opposed to flying over the Strait of Juan de Fuca and having to make a water landing. So there ahead of us is the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and you can see the mountain range of the Olympic Mountains just on the south side of the straits. Coming up on 4,500. And just ahead of us on the left side of the windscreen is going to be Friday Harbor Airport. Just slightly left of our course line here, but I want to overfly the airport to kind of give you a good look down there. Look how gorgeous. Current time is about 7:45 a.m. And it's absolutely perfect visibility. Just a little bit of haze. And just coming into view is going to be Friday Harbor Airport. And there it is down below in the lower left section of the windscreen. And slight left turn here. Nice steady climb at 1,000 feet per minute. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and activate heading on the stability augmentation system. So that's now active, and I can now steer the helicopter via the heading bug. Just to demonstrate that, I'm manipulating the heading bug on my IFR-1. I'm going to keep it set right there. And when we reach 8,500, I'm going to go ahead and click on altitude. So our altitude will hold at 8,500. And then after that, I'm going to switch over to nav mode and have it follow our programmed flight plan in the GTN 750. We'll go ahead and bring up ForeFlight. You can see where we are relative to the aeronautical sectional. There we are on course to our first waypoint, which keeps us out of that Canadian airspace. Coming up on 8,000. And there's 8,500. And altitude hold. All right, we're doing 122 knots over ground as indicated in the lower right side of ForeFlight. Now we're going to switch over to nav mode. So now looking at our GTN 750, that's the course line, and now the aircraft is going to intercept that course line and hold the navigation all the way through to the completion of our flight. But in this case, we're going to be landing on Mount Olympus, and we'll end the flight there. Okay, everything's looking great. We're over the Strait of Juan de Fuca. There's a beautiful sunrise off to the east. and looking out over Canada just behind the aircraft. And to the right there is the Pacific Ocean. We now have 44 nautical miles to Mount Olympus. And at the current speed of 132 knots over ground, 20 minutes. And I must say that the stability augmentation system really does take a lot of workload off the pilot. Okay, everything's looking great. We're gonna go ahead and pick the flight back up as we make landfall over by the town of Sequim. Okay, we're almost across the Strait of Juan de Fuca, coming up on the city of Sequim. They could see there on the left side of the aircraft. And Kilo Charlie Lima Mike, which is to the right front of the aircraft, is William Fairchild Airport, an airport that I have flown into several times. And there's the town of Sequim. Sequim, incidentally, is considered a rain shadow. They get about a third of the rain that the rest of the state gets. It's a very desirable place to live for that reason, especially here in the Pacific Northwest, where they get a fair amount of rain. Getting ready to make landfall here. And there, just below the helicopter to the right side, is a Coast Guard base. And it has a helipad. And there, just in front of the helicopter, is Mount Olympus. That's the tallest terrain feature that you can see out front. And here in a moment, we're going to be crossing over Mount Angeles and then Mount Carey before reaching Mount Olympus. When we get to Mount Olympus, we're going to fly around the mountain. That's one of the advantages of flying a helicopter versus a fixed wing. And we're going to get a good bird's eye view of the mountain. When I fly it in the fixed wing aircraft, of course, you're just kind of flying by. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, and I got some really beautiful 4K footage that I'm going to include here in the video as we get close to the mountain. But it's not quite the same as a helicopter where you can actually hover over and really soak in the beautiful views. And there to the right is the Pacific Ocean. And we're coming up to Olympic National Park. I'm going to recenter the aircraft so you can see where we are. And there's the town of Port Angeles just below the helicopter. 22 nautical miles to go, 9 minutes, 48 seconds. And we're doing a nice steady 131 knots over ground. Distance to Mount Olympus, as you can see down here on ForeFlight, is 21 nautical miles. The distance to the final destination, which is Kilo Tango India Whiskey Airport, is 83 nautical miles. We're going to end the flight once we land at the top of Mount Olympus. And there, just off the left side of the helicopter, that peak that you can see there in the left side of the windscreen is Mount Angeles, which stands at 6,025 feet. And there, as you look at ForeFlight, it's showing some buildings off to the left side of the aircraft. I'm going to look down and see if that's replicated accurately here. And there they are off in the distance. That's probably a lookout that you can drive up to in Olympic National Park. It never ceases to amaze me how accurately Microsoft Flight Simulator renders the terrain and all of its features. And there's Mount Carey just ahead of the helicopter, as you can see on ForeFlight. That stands at 7,000 feet. And there's beautiful Mount Olympus, that big dome that you see, the highest terrain feature visible out in front of the helicopter, there on the left side of the windscreen. And here in a couple of minutes, we'll slow the helicopter down and fly around and get a good bird's eye view of the mountain. And there's Mount Carey, almost just below the helicopter right now. One of the things that Microsoft Flight Simulator does also quite accurately is the rendering of the seasons. This is about what it looks like right now, with some of the permanent glaciers and snowfields on the north side of the mountains. Mount Carey, 7,000 feet, just below the helicopter. Okay, 2 minutes and 30 seconds to the mountain. We're going to go ahead and disengage the stability augmentation system and hand fly. We're going to maintain 8,500 feet before we descend down to get a nice look down and around the mountain. And we're right now doing 99 knots over ground. We're going to come around here to the east side of the mountain. Doesn't look like there's too many friendly places to land up there, but we're going to do our best to find a reasonably flat spot near the top of the mountain. So accurately rendered, those beautiful snowfields. Here in a minute, we're going to descend down into this valley here to get some views that we're not able to get in the fixed-wing airplane.
Sync rate, sync rate. Sync rate, sync rate.
may try to put it down there. I'll call that a saddle, kind of between those two peaks. Looks like there's a relatively flat area. All right, let's see what that's like. Okay, we're on the ground. Let's see how precarious of a location this was for us to land. Looks like we have a downslope. Let's hop outside and see what it looks like. Well, it certainly could be a lot worse. It's difficult to tell when you're landing on snow what the terrain fall off is, but I'm going to consider this a pretty good spot. Let's take a look at ForeFlight and see where we are in relation to the very top of the mountain. That's the 7969 elevation, and looks like that's probably just off to our left there, that peak, which is not landable. So I think we landed at about the highest spot that we possibly could. So just to kind of debrief the flight, what we went over here is creating a flight plan in ForeFlight, sending that flight plan over to SimBrief, uploading it into our GTN 750. We also talked about utilizing the stability augmentation system. Today we used the heading, navigation, and altitude hold. It's quite an amazing feature that Cow and Sim built into their helicopters. Thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll see you again on Next Flight.